Hello everyone, this is Kenneth Bruni from Tech and welcome back. Now in this series of videos, we are learning Python and this is specifically SENG 207 Programming for Engineers, a course taught at the University of Ghana. So if you have been following along, we have this particular structure over here, and from the very first one, this structure has been put together like the chapters of a book. So currently we are on chapter 19 where we are discussing or we are trying to implement a student MIS system using object-oriented programming. So this is going to be the second part of this video. Let me just collapse this, and we are going to deal with the things we have in section 2. Now in the previous one, we looked at some fundamentals, basic concepts, and these were the instructions we are following. So if you haven't watched that video, kindly do so in order for this to make sense. So in this particular video, you are going to proceed, and as and when new concept comes in here, we are going to change some few things over here, and you are going to bear with me. So over here in the second section, we are going to follow this instruction. So now we are going to define a class student which inherits from the person class. And now this brings us to the concept of inheritance. Now, object-oriented programming, or one of the reasons why we use object-oriented programming, is because of some of these things. So now there's something we call inheritance, there's polymorphism, and there's encapsulation and other concepts. Okay, now within the confines or within the scope of this tutorial, we are going to touch on inheritance. As and when it becomes necessary, I'll do encapsulation and polymorphism, but then that's basically beyond the scope of the things I would want to cover over here. But then leave a comment if you really are interested in polymorphism and encapsulation and other things, so that at least I'll make dedicated videos and draw inspiration from some of the things we are learning over here. So now inheritance basically means we are trying to create a class that will inherit from another class. So by inheritance, I mean we are going to inherit the attributes and the methods in that class. Now the kind of system I'd want to put out over here is we have this person class. Okay, so now this is going to be like the mother of all the classes, and we are going to create a student class that's going to inherit from person. And let me just show you. So in order to create a student class, we definitely know how to create a class. So I'll call this student, and because I would want to inherit from person, I'll just bring in a parenthesis over here, and I'll pass in the class I would want to inherit from. So in this case, person. And I'll bring in a semicolon, or sorry, a colon over here. Now, in order to make this work, at least for now, I'll do pass over here. So this is a student's class which has been created, but then it is inheriting from the person class. And we know that the person class has these attributes and these methods over here. So in here, this is what I can do. I can, for instance, create a student object. So now let me say student 1. And this student 1 is going to be a creation of the student class over here. Now the moment I bring in this, you can see that I'm being prompted to provide first name, last name, and age over here, and that's simply because of the inheritance being applied over here. Because once you are inheriting from somebody, you take in the traits and attributes of that person, and that's essentially what's happening over here. So for instance, I can say for the first name, I'm going to say Joanna, and for the last name I'm going to say Jones, and for the age I'm going to say 19. So I'll save this, and let me put up some space over here. Now if I'm to print, for instance, this student 1 object I have over here, now when I do a dot, I have access to all these, including the method. So for instance, I can have the full name method over here. And now when I run this, I do get Joanna Jones over here. I think there's something printing out over here. Let me just comment this one and come back over here. If I'm to run this, I get Joanna Jones, and that's looking good. If I'm to also get the initials, sorry, the names, initials, method, I'm supposed to get something like J.J or JJ. If I'm also to come in here and let's say print the email, which is an attribute over there, I get j.jones@st.ug.edu.gh. So everything is looking good, but clearly you can see that we haven't done a lot over here. We have just inherited, and when we inherit, by default we inherit everything So currently you could see that we are inheriting all the attributes and also all the methods. Okay, that's looking good. And this is going to make our code dry because we are not repeating ourselves. And if there's a lecturer class, that lecturer can also inherit from person, because definitely a lecturer is going to have a name for first name, a last name, and also an age. And there are some few things that may change. For instance, in the University of Ghana, students has this extension for their email address. So they have the ST, which is like students. In the case of lecturers don't have this ST. So you're going to see all the nitty gritty in order to make some of these changes as we move along. But now let's move on to the second point we have over here. Now I want to define extra attributes for students, such as hall of residence and courses, because everybody who is on that system, that database, is definitely not going to be a student. There are going to be staff, and even within the staff, there are going to be teaching staff and non-teaching staff. So everybody, in as much as there's that kind of inheritance, but then individually may have some unique attributes that may not apply to everyone. And that's essentially what we want to do over here. So the students will have a hall of residence, and some courses the student needs to register. A lecturer is not going to have a hall of residence. A lecturer is not going to register courses to write exams and stuff like that. So now let's see what we have over here. So once again, we use the init method, okay? And over here, if I'm to do this, and these are some of the reasons why you may want to use VS Code, because the moment I press enter, it gives me a whole lot of things over here. And I'm going to explain exactly what you see over here. So up until this point, okay, let me just comment what I have over here. Up until this point, this we already know, because this we are drawing inspiration from what we had over here. So over here, we have something like the init, we are passing in self, which is the instance, the first name, last name, and everything, because we are inheriting from person, is coming from person. Now the only change or the add-on we have over here is this super method. And this super method is basically telling our class that, okay, as for these parameters, it is super because we are getting it from the original person we are inheriting from, or the original person class we are inheriting from. So now, if I'm to leave it this way, it is still going to work. If I run this, I still get my jjones@st.ug.edu.gh. If I'm to do, for instance, like students1.first name, I do get Joanna over here. So everything is looking good. But now I would want to add in the hall of residence and courses. So now let's start with the hall of residence. I just need to come inside of this init method, and I'll do a comma, and I'll say hall. Now when I do hall and I run this, I do get an error, and it tells me that the student, the init method where we initially pass in all our attributes, is missing one required positional argument, which is hall. So what this simply means is, at the time of creating this object, student1 object, it was looking for hall, it didn't see it. So all that I need to do is to bring in a comma over here, and let me say Joanna cannot be in the Commonwealth Hall. So let me say Joanna is in Mensa Saba. So Joanna is in Mensa Saba Hall, and now when I run this, I don't get any problem because I've indeed provided a value over here. But now let's see what's going to happen. If I try doing student1.hall, I don't see hall over here. And the reason why I don't see hall, now if you are very observant, based on some of the things I've already mentioned, you could see that this has been grayed out, which simply means we are not using the hall parameter we have over here. Good. Now, in order to use hall, we just have to come in here and also come and set this attribute. So now I have to do self.hall is equal to hall over here. So now you can see that now, because we are setting it up, we are now using it. So now Mensa Saba is going to pop up whenever we try printing hall. So now if I'm to do students1.hall this way, and save this and run this, we do get Mensa Saba. Everything is looking good. So if we are adding in extra parameters, we have to do it this way. Now let me just comment what we have over here and come back to our person class. Now remember, our person class has no attribute hall, and for which reason, if I'm to come in here and try and comment this and try and do person1.haul, we don't get haul over here. And if I try running this, we get a problem. It says the person object has no attribute haul. So now the point I want to make over here is, in as much as we are inheriting from person has no attribute haul, but then student has the attribute haul. So the attribute haul is exclusively with the student's class. So any object created out of the student class is going to have that attribute, but then whatever I inherited from is not going to have that attribute. So this is the unique thing we have over here. Now the next thing I would want to look at, so we've looked at the hall of residence, and then we also want to look at the courses. So with the courses, we are going to look at something interesting over here. So I'm just going to have courses over here, and for courses I'm going to set this to none. So now when I do none, I'll not have a problem. So now when I save this and run this, we don't have a problem over here. Let me just comment what I have over here, because this is what is printing out. And if I'm to uncomment what I have over here and run this, we don't get any problem because courses has been set to none. Now if I leave this courses blank, or I haven't set it out to anything and run this, we get a problem because the student in its method is missing one required position argument. So I'll set this to none over here. So now if this is none, it is okay. Now the point I want to make is, when a student is registering and putting things inside of the MIS system for the first time, at the time the student bought forms and working with the registration system, the student does not automatically set the courses he or she wants to register. The courses will then come in later. And in order to make things a little bit realistic, we are not going to pass in courses over here yet. And the last point we needed to do was to create a student object from the class, student class, which we have already done over here. So now let's concentrate on the courses over here. So over here, this is what I want to do. Now there could be a number of courses that a student would register. So over here I can do something like self.courses is equal to indeed the courses I have over here. Now when I do this and run this, we don't seem to have any problem over here. So it is going to be none by default. But then let me show you this. When I bring in a comma and I pass in, for instance, Python over here and save this, if I do student1.courses this way and run this, you could see that I have Python over here. So remember what I did with the last video when it came to functions, that if we set a default, that default is going to take place, or that default is going to be inserted. However, if something is provided, in which case something was provided over here, then we don't have any problem. So for instance, let me just do this. If the default over here was, for instance, Java, and run this, we do get Python over here because something has been set over here. Now if I take this Python off and save this and run this, now we get Java over here because the default is taking effect. And I think I discussed this in that particular video. So over here we are setting this to none. So now when I do this and run this, we do get none over here, which is just empty. But then I can put in Python over here, and Python is going to look good. So now we see Python over here. But clearly this is going to be courses and not just a course. So I'd want to rather have this in a list. And in order to do so, this is what I want to do. I can put this in a list this way. And now when I run this, we get an empty list. But then I'm passing something over here. And it is an empty list because indeed we are setting self.courses to an empty list. So now this is what I want to do. And let me just clear this. I just want to show you this. So now this is going to be an empty list for now. But then let me just put in courses over here because that's what I want. So now I'm going to bring in an if block over here. So this is what I want to do over here. I'm going to say if courses is none, as we have over here, then I would indent this and set this into an empty list. So if it is none, then by default this is an empty list as we have over here. So now let me just show you. So if it is none, currently it is none over here. So now when I run this, we do get this empty list over here. Okay, then I'm going to say else, then what I'm going to do is self.courses is equal to courses we have over here. So if it is none, then it is an empty list, else just set self.courses is equal to courses. So now when I run this, it is an empty list, so I mean it is none over here, so we get this. But then the interesting thing is, if I'm to add in, for instance, let's say Python over here and run this, we do get Python showing up over here. Okay, this is the whole point I wanted to make over here. So now everything is looking good, and we want an instance where the students will definitely be adding courses, dropping courses, and printing all courses. And that's exactly what we are going to discuss in the third video. All right, so if you find value in the content I'm putting out over here, kindly support my work by subscribing to the Cambro channel. Also, don't forget to hit on the notification button so that anytime I release a video, you'll be duly notified. Share this video with friends and family who find this content very useful. At Cambro, we say learn programming. You can do it. Bye bye, and catch you in the next video.